Welcome to Kratom Sobriety. This is Charlie, and this is episode 59. Jacob and Decima have the week off. I think they're off organizing a labor union. I tried to explain to them that you can't get a raise when you're already being paid nothing, so I gave them a very generous time off policy. All joking aside, I'm very grateful for the two of them. This podcast probably wouldn't still be on the air without them, and it's also great they have a slightly different point of view than me. We have different personalities, and I think it makes the podcast be more well-rounded. This week we have an interview with JB, who will have a year off of Kratom next month, as will Decima, and Jacob just celebrated a year off last week. So I'm going to start off here with a voicemail, which we haven't listened to in a while.
Hi, I just listened to a podcast with Anne, and I am in the throes of a kratom addiction to Feel Free specifically, and I am really needing some help finding some resources to get off of this. I'm at a pivotal changes happening in my life right now. I'm 51 years old. I've been on it for a year and a half or more, and I've been up to 12 bottles a day some days. It's been anxiety and stress related, but that I really feel like is going to be the turning point for me. So it's hard to find resources. So I was really excited to hear the podcast. I've been looking searching for podcasts, and I can't believe I haven't come across this one.
And I'm glad we were able to connect this person to resources. And when people email us or call or reach out to us by social media, my three main advices for starting off trying to get help with Kratom. One is get to a meeting. There's Kratom specific meetings now, 6 days a week online, every day except for Friday. You can go to kratommeetings.com and find the schedule. And second, I suggest you get connected to one of the chat groups that are out there, either on WhatsApp or Signal. Several of the meetings actually have their own chats, and there's also some specifically for quitting kava kratom drinks. There's a woman-specific group. So either go to the meetings or email us at kratomsobriety@gmail.com, and we'll connect you with one of these groups. And third, there are some social media support groups out. If you're a Redditor, check out the Reddit support groups for quitting kratom. If you're a Facebooker, go to the quitting kratom groups on Facebook, and there's even a Discord with a quitting kratom group. So those are my three suggestions. Get to a meeting, try to join a chat group, and get involved in one of the social media support groups. One of the issues we find with quitters or people that are having trouble, a problematic relationship with kratom, when they read about it and they go out and try to find more information about it, they are either told two things. One, they're taking the kratom wrong. If you dose differently, if you tried a different product, switch strains, took a tolerance break, if you did things like that, you wouldn't be having problems with kratom. And then if that doesn't work, then the second thing you're told is something is wrong inherently with you as a person if you're having problems with kratom. And that's just simply not the truth. Kratom interacts with the opioid receptors and behaves a lot like an opioid. And that means there's tolerance, there's withdrawals, and some people it triggers cravings for more. And many people find it hard to quit kratom, both because of the dependency and also just because it makes them feel good. And then they end up taking more, and it just becomes a really automatic habit over time. And the longer you use it, this week we have an interview with somebody, JB, who actually went to treatment for kratom. And some people might think that's like an extreme measure. Kratom's a serious substance. And if you tried everything else, or if you can't quit, treatment might be the way for you. A 30-day program or more might be appropriate. Some other people go to an inpatient facility just to detox, to get through those. And that's coming increasingly more common. And JB also decided to use MAT, medicated assisted treatment, which other people also think is like taking a bazooka to a slingshot fight. And that's just simply not the case. Suboxone, I would say, should be a last resort when you've tried everything else. Many people go with Matt because they have a long history as a polysubstance abuser. They've had many relapses. They've tried other things and just haven't been able to quit. And Suboxone isn't necessarily be the first choice with Matt. There's also opiate blockers like naltrexone, which can help with relapse prevention too. And naltrexone doesn't necessarily create dependency and doesn't have a risk of withdrawal later on that many people worry about with Suboxone. So there's many paths. And this caller this week, they were using up to 12 Kratom free fills a week, which is an extreme, which is a lot, and it might warrant going to rehab or going the MAT route, especially if they can't quit. Using a taper plan doesn't work. Cold turkey with supplements doesn't work. This interview with JB, I checked in with them, and he didn't talk about this in the interview, but he was using about 40 grams a day for 10 years at the end. He was up to 40 grams a day. So just to give you a little bit of context for that. Here's the interview.
Decima here. I have an interview. There is another really cool podcast out there called Dopey. They have a Kratom specific recovery meetings. They have those on Thursday nights and they have one on a Sunday afternoon. And tonight I have with me one of the people that help host those meetings. JB, I'm so excited to talk with you. How are you doing?
The pleasure is all mine. Been listening to this podcast since pretty much its inception, and I love what you and Charlie have done. I think it's amazing that we have resources like the podcast and like our recovery meetings. I think it makes this process a whole lot more doable. So now I'm excited to do this episode.
Thank you. I'm also so grateful for those meetings as well, where we actually met each other. So let's let everybody else know a little bit about you. JB, tell us about yourself.
I'm late 30s, from New York, live in New York, lived here most of my life. I got stuck using Kratom for 10 years. This was during the height of my career. I worked in media. I'm also an artist and I work in academia as well. So I do a lot of things. Yeah. So I like to keep myself busy, clearly.
I can definitely get on board with that. Idle hands do the devil's work.
That's right. Yeah.
So I don't even have to ask you if you have quit. I already know that you have. So how long has it been since you quit?
They're over 10 months, which is unbelievable how fast the time went. But yeah, I quit in June of last year after, again, using it. Yeah, 10 months, 4 days, 6 hours, and 42 minutes. I used daily for a decade, and I was totally accepting of the fact that was just going to be my life. To quit was so surreal. I didn't anticipate it at a certain point being possible for me. I was very grateful that I was able to quit and that I had the resources to help me quit. The recovery community out there is incredible. I went to rehab. It made a world of difference for me.
How were you introduced to Kratom? How did it come into your life?
Yeah, so I always I was like a kid born in suburbia, like upper middle class. Like I had a very healthy yet boring home life. And as a kid, growing up in the late 90s, MTV culture was everywhere, Jackass was everywhere, internet wasn't really a thing yet. So I got this thing in my head that it sounds so fucking cringe, but the drugs were cool. When I was 14, I was like, oh wow, these people are the tortured artists and stuff like that. So as a kid, I was so curious. I wanted to be that. So I always had this knack for like drug usage, I guess. And when I started being able to do it, I certainly did. And I guess to not go fully into it, it turned into a pretty bad pill addiction in my early to mid 20s. And then after I discovered Kratom, I was able to pull myself off of those, which was great. And that's how it came to be in my life. It's this all natural thing can help you with your pill problem and blah, blah, blah. It gave it a shot and yeah, sure, worked great, but obviously created its own beast of a problem. At that point, I started using daily, made the pill problem go away really easily, but that just kept ramping up and up and up and up. And
Yeah, I
no,
did
go
the
ahead.
same thing. I used it as they're calling it PAT these days, plant assisted therapy, where basically people are using
Okay.
kratom to come off of other I know, right? But yeah, we were talking about that earlier, but yeah, I used it for the same reason to come off of other opioids and then ended up
Yeah.
in the whole thing. Also part of that jackass culture. And
Yeah.
understand that.
Uh, yeah. Stupid. It's stupid kid stuff, but that's
I will climb Johnny Knoxville like a tree, okay? Let's just talk about that a little bit more because you touched on it. It sounds like you did have a history of addiction with and some other substance
yeah.
use. Do you want to go into that a little bit?
Yeah, I used a lot. I experimented a lot and I have a very anxious mindset. And in using and exploring drug culture, I struggled to find something that really worked for my brain. Weed makes me horribly paranoid, cripplingly. Yeah, hundreds of times, and many times it didn't, but I definitely have a tendency towards that. So I didn't enjoy that. And the long story short is that I found what I liked when I found pills because it gave my brain and my body the chance to turn off a little bit, but it made me a little sloppy. And I was taking them at work, stuff like that. And then when Kratom came along, it was like, oh, it's obviously not as extreme, it's not as intense, but it was one third of a pill, a quarter of a cup of coffee, and quarter of an Adderall, all mixed up into one. That's how it worked for me and in my brain. And those three things were all near and dear to my heart at the time. The only one still is coffee. So to find something that gave me a pinch of all those things at once, didn't get me sloppy, I could be high functioning. I went to work, it was fine. Yeah, it lended itself the ability to just accelerate because it was so perfect for what I was after and for my mindset. And after trying all these different drugs, that was the thing that just really hit home for me and let me be the person that I had built at that time, working in a office job and all that. It didn't hinder my life all too
Like
much at
it
that
was
time.
the safer alternative is what it sounds like you're trying to say to me.
It's not even that it was safer. Like it was that I didn't give a shit so much about that. I cared about like the functioning aspect, and it wasn't out of my own like safety. It was out of like I have obligations. I have to make sure I meet my obligations. I have to make sure I write my do my work. I have to make sure my house is taken care of. It's just how my brain is. It struggles to turn off. It was really it just slid right in that comfortable zone of like relaxation, focus, energy all at once.
Checks all the boxes. A lot of people say that, and it's like several different kinds of medications at once. And it's like an opioid, an antidepressant, an upper. Did you have that same experience? Like that
I
it
mean,
filled that need of several
oh, it
different things.
it
Like,
definitely did. Over time, it became a need of its own, obviously, and
yeah.
it started. I could very much feel it altering the chemical balance in my brain those later years. I would say like the past 3 years, just because it got so out of control and I was using it so much to a point where it was like every other. So I just felt this. If you could picture a sine wave, that was like my brain response. It was just like so heightened, up, down, up, down, up, down throughout the day because I was just using. Yeah, it filled a lot of voids, but then it created these like craters as well. It created the valleys. It got me up to the mountain, but it definitely created the valleys too.
No doubt. And so let's just get into a little bit about that. What were some of the first earlier signs that it was a problem?
Yeah, I was pretty obtuse towards it for 2 years. From yeah, the first 2 years I was using it, it was it's a plant, whatever, fine, it's all good. It's not a pill. I did so much better than what I was doing. I'm sure I could quit whenever I wanted to. Yeah, so I don't think too much about it. What happened was I got a new job in 2015, 2016, something like that, early in the year. And I had to take a drug test. And now I knew that Kratom wasn't tested, especially maybe now for drug tests. But at the same time, I was like, let me just lay off it for a few days. Let me just chill out, just not use it for a few days. No big deal. Just so I can comfortably walk in right in there and everything be fine. Again, logically, I know it doesn't make sense because the test is just, it's black or white. It's there, it's not there. And whether they test for that, no one did it. But this is just how my brain worked. This is just how I wanted to do it. So yeah, it was like Sunday and I had to test on Thursday. So I'm like, all right, 4 days, whatever. And by Tuesday, I was crawling up walls. I couldn't sleep. I was sweating. I had never experienced anything like it. And like, at first I was like, maybe I'm getting sick. And then 36 hours in, I'm like, oh no, this is what withdrawals feel like, isn't it? So that was my first bout with it, with withdrawals. And they were so bad, so chicken shit of them, so afraid of them that pretty much from that point forward, first of all, I didn't make the 4 days. I had to take them. Of course, everything was fine.
That confirmed it for you, right? Whenever
Yeah, couldn't even last 4 days, so I had to use some. And after that, I was just so chicken shit to ever not want to go through that again. So that was the point where in my life I was starting to think maybe I'm just stuck with this. Maybe that's okay.
Did you have health problems and other kind of problems in your life because of your kratom use?
Physical, no, thankfully. I used enough to the point where I was sure I was going to kill my liver. But pretty early on, I started taking, I can't remember, vitamin that you're supposed to take for your liver that I still take to this day. And I watched that shit like a hawk and it never got bad. I was very lucky. So I was always expecting physical health problems and it never happened. But yeah, mental problems started to pile up. Like I got a lot more paranoid. I got a lot more mad. I got a lot more anxious when I wasn't using. So I had to use to come down and then vicious cycle. So it definitely, like I was saying, it definitely changed my brain chemistry. And that impacted how I treated people too. The problems in my life weren't just physical health, mental health, but they were also social. And that's for me, that's almost worse than creating problems for myself. My health is my health. I control it, and if I fuck up, but to hurt other people, like family and friends, I'm the kind of person where that stings even more.
A lot of people say that it's those kind of things are
Yeah.
worse than the physical. So, what made you want to stop? What was your final straw?
I was 10 years in. I was taking it every other hour. I couldn't think straight anymore. I had a new job ish, year into it, when it was a new job. Worked so fucking hard. And then I had this fucking 10-pound weight on my shoulders holding me down with its own shit and the addiction. It made me, I couldn't think straight. I couldn't think straight in my new job. And then on top of it, probably not something we'll go into too much detail on, but I hurt a few people in my life that really mattered to me in a couple of different ways. But long story short, but it creates a lot of complacency, right? Like we all know that. It creates a lot of complacency in your life. And it made me exceedingly complacent to the point where I couldn't move my life forward. And I hadn't really grown as a human being 10 years mentally. And that started to come out in how I treated other people that were very near and dear to me, people that I loved. And I couldn't move forward and created a lot of hurt. I knew at that point I didn't want to be that person. I knew at that point how much of a shithead I was. And I knew I didn't want to hurt people that I loved anymore. And I knew my parents were worried about me, but they didn't say anything. Not in a neglectful way, but they were trying to respect and give me space. And I'm an adult and I'm still working and taking care of things. So they just hope I make the right decisions for my life, that kind of shit. But I knew they were worried. So it's just a culmination of all those things: the hurt, the worry from the people who loved me, brain chemistry just feeling all fucked up, and just getting really uncomfortable at work. Yeah, all that stuff just came together. And I just wanted to prove to those people that still cared for me, even though I had fucking hurt them, that I could be a better person and that I could grow and that I wasn't just this stagnant human being that I was for the past 10 years.
So, how did you do it? Did you taper, go cold turkey? Did you have any
Yeah.
assistance medically? How did you do this?
Yeah, from my experience 8 years ago at that time, nine years ago, whatever it was, from my previous experience trying to quit, I knew I wasn't strong enough to do it on my own. I was still afraid. I was still afraid of those withdrawals. That's just how fucking nasty they were. And I don't know if they're as nasty for everyone. Some people seem to get by okay quitting. Some people really struggle and say it's worse than heroin. Right? It was fucking terrible. And I knew I never wanted to experience that again. And I knew I was really afraid. Cold turkey wasn't an option. And I just knew I was going to need help. Find to go to rehab. And I think that helped me get my mindset in the right place to actually quit because I had to find a place and I did it very methodically. It took a few weeks to find a place that would work for me. I didn't want to go to one of those kind of California luxury resort kind of rehabs, but I also didn't want to go to some place that was like scary. So I had to find a good medium, works my health insurance, all that stuff. But it helped me get into that mindset of I'm saying goodbye to this abusive friend, I hate to say it, that I had in my life for so long, but I was getting ready to say goodbye to that. So I methodically planned a rehab stint. And it was also a good way to show, I think, the people that I hurt that I was serious about trying to fix this, right? Because I had never expressed interest in rehab before. I was just like, nah, that's who I am. Fuck it. This is just who I am. This is just what I'm going to be. This is what I'm just going to take it forever. You can't change that. I think when they heard that, they had some faith. And I went to a few recovery meetings online. A friend of mine just said, go to a couple meetings and just feel the vibe. It's not a commitment. Keep your camera off if you want. Just go. You don't have to physically go anywhere. It's all online now. Just go and listen to this speaker speak. And I did. And it was very inspiring. It was amazing how my brain responded to it. I think I cried just because I was so deep in the fucking myself. So yeah, that's how I got my brain in the headspace to be able to quit. I eventually found a rehab and I went there and yeah, they did the MAT route with me, which I will advocate pretty strongly for. I know it's very controversial to use Suboxone to quit Kratom. I'm sure a few people will listen to this and scoff at me, but if there are others who are listening to this and feel like that might be the right route for them or need help with that or are open-minded to that and they need someone to talk to, I'd be glad to help them because it really worked for me. It gave me a shot at rehabbing. I wasn't going to be able to do it myself. I wasn't strong enough of a human being at that time. So to give me a chance to quit, it was like it gave me my life back. It gave me my autonomy back where I was held prisoner for so long by this plant for medically controlled substance to be able to insert itself into my life and give me my life back, give me a second chance, give me a fighting shot at quitting, and give me back my daily calendar. Because again, I lived and died by the clock. Every other hour, I was watching the minutes for the next fix. It was fucking insane now that I think about it. But I planned how I ate around it. I planned how I slept around it because I couldn't get through a full night's sleep. I planned how I traveled with it. I wouldn't go to places where it was illegal. All my friends in my life know I have my backpack with me everywhere I fucking went. It might as well have been glued to my back because guess what was inside of it, right?
Did you have a travel spoon? We were talking about a travel spoon.
I had a fucking travel spoon, man. The thing was fucking grimy. Yeah. I used that thing for 6 years. It just sat in my backpack collecting grime. Anyway, this is a very long-winded way of saying it's not for everyone, but if you're in the hole as deep as I was, and there was very little chance of getting out, and it felt very dark around, it feels very dark around you, and you are tethered to it in a way that you've never been tethered to anything before in your life. This gives you your life back immediately and gives you the chance to start healing yourself. And that's what I think is so special about it, so valuable about it. I didn't have to look at the clock anymore. I didn't have to keep my backpack with me. The reactions I got from people in my life when I first went to see them and I didn't have my backpack with me, they were like, what, something's wrong, something's different. So yeah,
I
I made
get
some,
it. I definitely I say whatever it takes and mind your own recovery.
yeah,
What works for one person that might not work
same,
for another, but whatever it takes.
same,
I was also doing that. Every fucking thought of the day was consumed with when am I going to take my kratom again? I totally get it. I get it. I did have one question for you. Whenever you went into rehab, at that point, was it just kratom, or had you left everything else alone and were just kratom, or were there other things?
it was a pretty bad Xanax problem too.
Gotcha. Yeah, I
Yeah.
actually did the same thing. Like when I was using kratom, I started using other things that I had not used in a long time, and it was just this really weird thing, like using Adderall and Xanaxes and shit. And I had never done that
Yeah.
before.
Yeah. All that was where my interests reside. I just was past the point in my life where smoking weed was interesting or compelling. And again, I just had my brain just wouldn't allow it. So yeah, it was really it was kratom and Xanax were the problem child. But yeah, I took Adderall too, and yeah,
I'm really glad that the rehab and the mat was able to help you. You already said that it instantly gave you your life back. So, how were the first 30 days? What was that like compared to being stuck on kratom?
yeah. The first week of it was detoxing at a facility, and that was weird, surrounded by all these other people with their own issues and medical staff monitoring you, and I can't talk to the outside world.
Did they understand kratom in this facility, or were you like,
Yeah, that's a great question because a lot don't. So, what I did when I was methodically searching for a rehab was calling them all. I had a little fucking questionnaire. This is the kind of person I am. I had a little questionnaire. I had a Google sheet with all the answers filled out for what they said in terms of living conditions, how much they understood certain addictions, and things like that. Right. One of my questions was, of course, are you familiar with kratom? Do you treat it? How many people have you treated with it for it? And yeah, the 30, 40 I called, I would say most knew to say yes, were aware of it at this point. It's big enough now that most of the rehab call centers are like, yeah, oh, yeah, we've seen it before. But then when you ask and you got into it with them, they didn't really know how to respond further. Okay, how do you treat it? What are the common issues with it? So there was only a handful that understood it. So I specifically picked one that did. And I don't know. I don't know if it's rude or not that they take your phone. It doesn't, it made it harder for me. Yeah, I understand why they do it, but I respect it, but I didn't enjoy that. So anyway, that first week was weird because I was in this weird place and my brain was again so used to the manic up and down state and the 2 hour clock and you eat after you take but not before and all these fucking rules that I had for how I oriented my life. So to just throw those all away pretty much overnight, it was like, what the fuck is going on? What is this world around me? I was very confused, but optimistic because it was working and I was relatively pain free. It wasn't pleasant. MAT doesn't make it like easy peasy, but it makes it doable,
it just
right?
takes away the physical withdrawals, right? You still have to deal with all the mental shit.
Yeah. Yeah. Even physically, I still had some discomfort because I was using so much and I insisted on a very low dosage of Suboxone. So I was very confused, but optimistic. And I just had a positive outlook. And I started to think about how something I said before that my growth as a human had just stagnated for years and years and years. Because I was just complacent, just sitting around doing drugs, sitting around doing kratom. So those first 30 days, I started to actually think about what kind of person do I want to be? How do I want to catch up for the last 10 years. How do I want to grow up? As silly as that sounds. And that was really enthralling. I was consuming as much as I could about books and media about how to recover from the situation and how your brain grows coming out of it and how you can become a better person. Like all of that stuff just excited me because I saw a light that I hadn't seen since I was between the kratom and the pills, since I was like 20 years old. It was mind boggling those first 30 days.
Crazy to see that
Optimistic.
recovery works. I
Yeah.
get it. No,
Yeah.
I never really gave recovery a true like shot either. I don't know if that's really what you're saying, but yeah, I too was surprised by how well it actually works if you participate in it.
I was just afraid to remove the substance out of my life. I didn't want to deal with the relapse again. So it's not even that I didn't want to give recovery a chance. It's that I had just accepted that was who I was. And I was just going to be this kratom user for the rest of my days. I did that years and years ago because I was just terrified of, I couldn't imagine what life would be like without it. I was so brainwashed by it. I had done it so much for so long and I just couldn't be a person without it. People I were close to at the time, when I was getting ready to quit, I had so many conversations about what if life isn't fun anymore? What if I'm a boring person? Which is so fucking ironic because kratom makes you boring. But what if I don't feel good anymore?
Good. Yeah, that's what
And
I was about to say. What if I never feel good?
yeah, and so bananas to think about now. But
It
at the
is.
time, I didn't know. I was so scared and I was so unsure. So this first 30 days, I'm realizing like, oh, I can still have fun. I can still feel good. Wow. You
Mind
know,
blowing.
yeah, yeah,
It really
pretty
is.
much.
I get it. And it's like you're waking up to life.
Yes. Yeah. It's cliche as fuck, but it really does. You get like that born again feeling in a religious way, but in a metaphysical way. Like you really do feel like, yeah,
New beginning, new start, fresh.
yeah, yes.
Absolutely. So what else helped you besides the mat? What I'm sure you used other things that helped you in your recovery. Let's
Yeah.
talk a bit about that.
Yeah. A lot of meetings, the support of my friends and family, literature. I guess I would say meetings were the biggest part. I am such an advocate for online meetings. It takes away so much of the pressure versus having to go in person. Just finding communities that understood me, understood where I was, understood the kind of pain I was in previously, and knew what to say to help me it was just incredible to be around like-minded souls who had also struggled, many of them their whole life, with addiction. And I found a litany of different meetings to serve different purposes. So like the kratom meeting was very much specifically to get my kratom problems out. And that's the dopey meeting we talked about at the top. And then I also found a Buddhist community. It's called Refuge Recovery. I'm sure some people listening have heard of it, but it's a great program and it's massive. No matter what hour of the day, there's a meeting, pretty much. And not kratom specific, no, not by any means. I think I've met one person through it that had a kratom problem out of hundreds. But such a valuable kind of ideology to immerse yourself in to help recover. It's a good framework. It's an amazing framework to help your recovery, especially if AA or NA isn't necessarily for you. Not to say it can't coincide, but yeah, Buddhist-based, Dharma-based recovery did a world for me. I'm not even Buddhist, but mindfulness, meditation, that's just good for the soul. And having that's something I would recommend to anyone coming out of this is get yourself like a collective of meetings and set a schedule for yourself every week. Monday is this refuge meeting, Tuesday is this kratom meeting, Wednesday is that, and make sure they all have different flavors. to your problems, to your addiction. Make one of them about, the mental aspect. And keep that schedule. And that'll go a long way. And then everyone says this is would complete. I had 10 years without lifting a dumbbell, complete Luddite, didn't really show any interest in physical fitness whatsoever. And then very early on in my recovery, probably within those first 30 days, I was like, I'm going to go to the gym. And it just helped so much. Just going there and sweating, and you can feel your body recover when you're straining it a little bit, especially when you haven't in so long. So I went one day on a whim, and I've gone literally every single day after that since then. 10 months, every single day I go to the gym, and I love it. It's therapeutic.
It's like you can feel the demon leaving your body, I swear, whenever you're
Yeah,
working
through
out hard.
sweat. Yeah, exactly. No,
It really
that's
does
a
work.
great way to put it. I don't know, when I talk to people now about how to quit, advice and guidance and all that, and I love to do that too. I really have enjoyed starting to give back and help others. I feel like I'm in a place where I can just start to do that now, and it's immensely rewarding. But yeah, the meeting kind of cadence and schedule, working out, those are the things that I tell everyone to set up for themselves.
I
It
do
makes
the
one difference.
same. I do the same exact thing with the meetings. I have every night I have a
Yeah.
meeting and they're all different ones because there's something to be taken from each one, from each community. I love that advice so much.
Oh, so actually, one other thing I'm going to say about working out is that when you quit, and if there are people listening to this that are on the cusp of quitting, this is something else to consider. You're going to eat. You're going to have to eat. And not like in a way where you did when you were on Kratom, where you could skip meals and work off an empty stomach because that would make the highs better. Very likely to be calorie deficient when you're a Kratom user, Kratom addict. But when you're done and you're recovering, you have to eat. You have to get nutrients. You have to get sustenance. And you're going to gain weight. And no one wants to gain weight, obviously. Not obviously, but more often than not, people don't want to gain weight. There are some cases, but I didn't want to gain weight. Going to the gym allowed me to eat in a way that helped foster that helped enable my recovery too. So yeah, just like nutrients, eating, enjoying food, that makes a difference too. But it really helps. You just got to counterbalance. You got to counterbalance it.
Yeah, I think we also eat for that dopamine after we quit too sometimes because I gained a little
Oh
bit
sure,
too. I'm
yeah,
not gonna lie.
yeah. Everyone does. Yeah.
All right, John, how about a message for your future self? If you come back and listen to this in a year, what do you want to tell yourself?
Again, I lived for so long not knowing or accepting that I just was, and I wasn't interested in growing, and I was just going to be this abuser that I really didn't look drug abuse. Too clear. I really did. I never looked into the future. Now I'm starting to, for the first time in a long time, and I'm still just trying to keep an open mind to it all. And I've made some changes additionally in my life this year that have helped me grow. I had some hard stuff go down this year too, that if I was still using, I don't know how I would have got through it. The long and short of it is my my dad passed away 8 weeks ago, and it was all out of the blue. It was all really sudden. And I had to, first off, I wouldn't have seen him the last time if he was still using. I know I'm going off on a tangent here, but I think it all
You're
ties
good. You're
into
good.
how I think about the future. But had I not quit, I wouldn't have seen him his last life. I know for a fact because I would have been preoccupied. I would have been. They don't live near me. I would have been disinterested in going to see them. I would have been preoccupied with work. I would have been consumed. I allowed my life to get consumed by work and drugs, and I didn't see my family for a long time. So I would not have seen him his last day alive, which was a total freak thing. But I got to see him his last day, and I got to have dinner with him like it was a normal day. And from that point on, I knew when he died, and I put two and two together, and I realized this had all happened. I traveled to go see him, and it was like I got there within a day. when he actually died. It all felt very fucking cosmic. Some fucking energy was pushing me to quit and pushing me there, and I'm not a strong believer in that stuff, but it changed how I think about things, because it felt way too coincidental. So yeah, he died, and I had to go through the funeral. I had to go through all this stuff so suddenly. And if I was using, I don't know, I probably would have felt really shameful on top of all the other shit that'd be going through my brain in these very manic ways. And I would have had to live with that shame for the rest of my life. Not only, I also would have had to live with the fact that I didn't see him on the last day for the rest of my life, because I wouldn't have. So coming back around, events like that come out of nowhere shape how you think about your future self, your world, a year from now, whatever, in such immense ways. And I think the version of me a year from now just needs to keep these memories really fresh and remember what it was. The years are going to go by, and it's going to be harder for me to remember him and those moments and my last night having dinner with my family. And right now, I'm just so immensely thankful to myself and the world around me that I was sober during those moments. Because if I wasn't, I would never live it down. I wouldn't have even had the moment. So I don't want to forget. I can't forget that. Just like how I can't forget him. And over time, it'll be hard to remember everything about him. But a year from now, I just hope that these feelings that I'm having about the world and about sobriety and about how those two collided when he passed away, I just hope they're just as fresh. It really changes how you think about the world around you. There's a long answer for you. Good luck editing that, Charlie.
Again, I'm so sorry for your loss, but I'm also so
Thanks.
glad that you were able to share those last moments sober. I know that had to be magical, so I'm so glad that you're sober too. I'm glad that we both are.
Me too.
And
Me
I
too.
already know your life is so much better. If you want to talk a little bit more about how great it is and any last words that you want to leave everybody, let's just end on a good note. I
Sure.
and everybody appreciates your vulnerability. That's really deep and that's tough. Thank you for sharing that.
No, it's no problem. It's cathartic. Yeah, I'm sure through the last hour I've conveyed how much better life is just by de facto, because I was in
Yeah.
such a fucking hole the last few years of my addiction. But I guess what I would say to everyone is, if you're out there and you're listening and you're struggling too, or you're thinking about quitting, or you want to quit, or you tried and it was too hard and it hurt too much or whatever, don't let fear consume you the way I did. And it carried on for years and years longer than it should have because of that fear. And the community is out there to help you. We're all here to help you. I mean that from the bottom of my heart. I know it's probably hard to believe on the outside looking in to the recovery community, but it really is a special and amazing place full of selfless people who just want to help others, myself included. And I hate to say, I feel like I know a disordinate amount about this fucking substance, but I think I do. And from just the extent to which I used it. And if you want help or you're struggling, I would love to help you. And I will. So please, guys.
I can definitely back JB on that for sure. Not hard for me to believe. The meetings are 100% so helpful. And the online Kratom recovery community was literally my only recovery program for a little while. He's not exaggerating, you guys. We're all out here for you and everybody. There's something about being in a meeting, Kratom specific, where everybody can relate and it just clicks. I'm not crazy here and I'm not alone. So thank you so much, JB. I know I can say that it's been helpful. You are definitely a light and an inspiration in the community. I appreciate you so much for sharing your story. Yeah, thank you. We'll just get on with the rest of the show. Thank you. Hello, friends. Recently, there was a tragic Kratom story in the headlines titled, Detection of Kratom in Fatal Crash Prods Mississippi County Leaders to Take Action Against Substance. This article was published on Sunday, April 28th by Magnolia State Live. It states the potential dangers of kratom, a legal substance sold in many Mississippi convenience stores, were recently highlighted after toxicology tests from a January fatal crash indicated that the driver in the crash was under the influence of a significant quantity of metragenin, the primary alkaloid found in kratom. In response, the Rankin County Board of Supervisors has enacted legislation prohibiting the use, purchase, possession, distribution, or sale of kratom products within the county. How kratom use affects a person's driving is something that has not really been studied or talked about much within the community. However, some longtime users in recovery, such as Nicola, have said things like this: You can't drive if you are on kratom. I don't know how other people do it, but when I was addicted to it, my vision would get blurry and I couldn't even read a huge sign that was 5 feet away from me. Also, it made me uncontrollably fall asleep while sitting in random places all the time. Thank God I was never crazy enough to get behind the wheel while intoxicated. Thank you, Nicola, for sharing your opinion and experience with driving on kratom. Despite widespread kratom use, there is a lack of knowledge regarding its effects on driving. I recently read a research article on Taylor and Francis online titled Effects of Kratom on Driving, Results from a Cross-Sectional Survey, Ecological Momentary Assessment, and Pilot Simulated Driving Study. They stated their objective was to evaluate the self-reported driving behaviors of kratom consumers and assess their simulated driving performance after self-administering kratom products. Again, let me read that again. The self-reported driving behaviors of kratom consumers. They performed a remote and in-person simulated study. Candidates were recruited using social media, kratom advocacy and vendor group, podcasts, public flyers in Baltimore and surrounding areas, and word of mouth. They claim their aim was to evaluate the self-reported, again, driving behaviors of people who regularly use kratom rather than occasional users, and to determine whether the responses differed based on their reported frequency of kratom use. The results: over 90% of participants surveyed self-reported driving under the influence of kratom. Most reported low rates of risky driving behavior and expressed high confidence, of course, in their driving ability after taking kratom. The conclusion that I personally have drawn here is that this study is an attempt to prove that it is overall safe to drive while using kratom. If you want to read the study and decide for yourself just how unbiased you believe it really is, I would encourage you to do so. But I could also handpick, recruit 20 people and ask them how their driving went after drinking alcohol socially. They'd probably tell me that they did great. Or we could look at it another way. We could ask 20 people to drive their cars for a week without their seatbelts. Let us know if you've had any accidents. We all know the chances are pretty high that there would be little to no accidents during that 1 week. But would we then conclude that it's safe to drive without wearing our seatbelt? Personally, I say both are true. When I was using kratom, I drove while using many times, and a lot of times I probably was fine. Most of the time, I would have self-reported no issues. But there were definitely times that, due to the high level of intoxication I was under, I definitely should not have been on the road. I've done the same thing when it comes to other substances. But now that I am in recovery, I know better, so I do better. I don't know about you, but when it comes to my safety and the safety of other innocent human beings on the road, I choose to err on the side of caution. Keep it kratom free, you guys.
Resource of the week. Hello, this week's resource is more geared toward those of our listeners that may have chosen medicated-assisted treatment to address their kratom addiction. What we have for you this week is a website called Help Me Calm that is focused on everything related to buprenorphine, Suboxone, essentially. It has all kinds of different resources about how buprenorphine works on the brain, the treatment, how to induce on buprenorphine, common side effects, ways to save cost on your buprenorphine subscription, storage of strips that you may have, but most importantly, it's got this cool taper calculator that essentially has a good way to design your own custom taper. So basically, you can put in the amount of buprenorphine that you've used or Suboxone you've used over the last 10 days, and it will calculate a taper for you, which I thought was pretty cool. It takes kind of the work out of your hands and does it for you. The only kind of thing I would caution about using this taper is it is a bit fast. I think a lot of doctors would recommend you stabilize on your dose for at least 10 days. And in some cases, when you're cutting down from the higher dosages, let's say from 12 milligrams to 8 or even 4 to 3 to 2. It's got some fast moves that are 5 days or less in some cases. You may not want to go that aggressively. But nonetheless, I think it's a really good website. It looks a little dated, but it's got some really good information, including size comparisons for how to cut your strips into smaller pieces. And I really thought the taper calculator, as well as the kind of ceiling effect explanation and how buprenorphine acts on the brain and some imaging that they have was really cool. A really good resource for those of our listeners that may have decided to use medicated assisted treatment to address their kratom addiction. So check it out, and that's kratom, that's our resource of the week.